And we were live, episode 10, How to Get into Investment Banking. I want to give a very special shout out to my podcast listeners on Spotify and Apple Podcasts. The download numbers are pretty insane. I genuinely am shocked to have so many podcast listeners like across the world, literally. So shout out to everyone. I literally have listeners in New Zealand, Austria, Australia, New Zealand, Saudi Arabia, Canada, Mexico, Argentina, Chile, Colombia. I mean, crazy. Like, that's insane. So again, for all of my listeners worldwide, I really never thought I'd be saying that. Who do I think I am? Drake. He has a line, as you guys know, I'm a huge Drake fan. He's like 7 a.m. in Germany. Like, who would have thought? Anyway, let me humble myself and get back down. But look, to three things I really want to get to my podcast listeners. Guys, you guys are missing out on a ton. I really need you to go to howtogetintoinvestmentbanking.com and subscribe to the email list, because all these episodes are online on YouTube. And if you subscribe to me on YouTube, in the description box on YouTube, each one of these episodes has a corresponding PDF that you're supposed to download and use, so you can go through the episode with me and do the homework assignments as well, so you can start figuring out your path in investment banking, since I can't work and coach everyone one-on-one, right? I'm only one person. So that's one thing, is that I really need folks to go and do that, especially on my podcast listeners, because I had a student who reached out to me and they were like, "Hey, Sajin, love your podcast, episode 9. Do you have any advice on how I can convey my interest in media and entertainment when I reach out to folks?" And I was like, "Wait, do you not get my PDFs? Like, where are you listening to this?" And they were like, "Hey, I listened to it on Apple Podcasts." And I'm like, "Hey, even in the Apple Podcast, in the description, there's a link that takes you to the PDF that you can keep up with." But to bypass all that, again, just go to howtogetintoinvestmentbanking.com, sign up to the email list, and or just subscribe to the YouTube, because when you sign up to the email list, I send these like episode guides out with every episode, right? And when you're subscribed to the YouTube, in the YouTube, I have like I'm able to break it out more, because if you're listening to it on an audio platform, you can't necessarily it's not easy to download, right? Because you're on a phone and all that. So, again, thank you to everyone who listens to me on Spotify. Like, and Apple Podcasts, I genuinely am like shocked. I'm getting hundreds of downloads each episode. I think that is pretty cool. So, without further ado, let's go into episode 10. Episode 10 is actually really important to me. 10 is my favorite number. So yeah. But in this episode, I know the title of this episode is like County College to Investment Banking. How did I do it? And even though it's like, hey, what was my journey from county college into investment banking and getting into a finance career or what have you, this is advice that is analogous to anyone, right? Even if you're at a non-target or even at a target, there are just some key principles that students often overlook or don't necessarily have. They don't necessarily know to have the green light to go and get. So I'm going to be covering some of these key principles that I applied and I kind of use as my sounding board each and every day. And in this episode, I'm going to particularly be focusing on freshmen and sophomores who may be at county colleges and what they should do. So let's dive into that. But just 1 second to my audio listeners. I'm hiccuping really bad right now, so I have to drink some water. But of course, all I have is a boiling mug of hot tea. And I know people who are watching, I'm decked out. Patagonia, how to get into investment banking, hat, how to get into investment banking, and my cup, non-target life, how to get into investment banking. So I know a few folks have asked about merch. I don't have merch yet. It's not live. It's on the link. You can go, but it's not live, but it will be. But anyway, yeah, this tea is way too hot. I'm just gonna talk. So, all right. So guys, the first thing I'm gonna talk about is what to do RFN, and RFN stands for right, F word, and N stands for now. So RFN, right, F and now, right? And again, for the folks who are watching, if you orient yourself to the top of the slide, listen, this is regardless of if you're at a non-target, and that doesn't matter, right? It doesn't matter if you're at a county college, semi-target, mid-level, doesn't matter. Whatever school you're at, whatever target you're in, whatever grade you're in. I know I'm going to be focusing on freshmen and sophomores, but at least right now, just regardless of what grade you're in, these are kind of key things to think about, right? So on the left-hand side, a lot of students right now are particularly paralyzed as far as like what they need to do, and they're paralyzed at the moment. And what I'm trying to stress is that all the advice and things that I'm giving to you, you need to be able to do this in a COVID adjusted environment as well, right? Because regardless of whether or not we have COVID or we don't have COVID, or COVID point of view, you have to maneuver like this, right? And that's why when I put here, I'm like, hey, we have to hold a few assumptions static. So the steps that I'm going to go over, these are things that you should be following year round. Now on the right hand side, this other box that I have, like I said, just kind of reiterating, these are steps that you need to follow. I would be making these steps regardless, because a lot of folks like, hey, student, like, hey, Sajin, the advice you give us, is this regardless of COVID, or let's say things get back to normal? And frankly speaking, for most front office jobs, things are quote unquote normal, right? People are in the office 5 days a week, or, you know, maybe VPs and directors. I know some VP friends, they come in, like, it's not mandatory, but they might come in two times a week, whatever. And MDs are not mandatory at all. At some firms, it might be different firm to firm. But here are the 3 things that matter before I go into my 5 pillars, right? You need a good GPA, you need good experience, and most importantly, you need shots on target. Now, understand there are ways to get a good GPA. There are ways to get quote unquote good experience, and you can always kind of bankify your resume. And there's also ways to increase your shots on target, excuse me. But all of this advice, all of this requires, it requires time, right? It requires time, right? That's the name of the game, is that you need to give yourself time, and you need to utilize that time effectively, right? So I want to clarify that some of the tactics I'm going to go over, you're going to listen and be like, oh, Sajin, this sounds great, but like, this is hard. But again, like I iterate, how I iterate, I mean, in a way I'm iterating, but yeah, that I speak to and I reiterate in every episode is that this is not easy, and you need to act. And look, this is how I kind of did things, was I would always act as if my back was up against the wall and I have no choice but to succeed. And look, this might be a little like hardcore, and I know some folks would be like, all right, dude, like, calm down. But I had to put food on the table, right? I had to make sure I got a job in the front office, or I'm positioning myself to be able to lateral into a full-time banking role, or maybe get somewhere like a middle office and then I can move over into banking. Because I had a single mom, I had a sister, and I was like, the Indian man, male of the household, I have to help my family. And again, look, for most people, granted, aren't first-generation immigrants, but you have to want this as badly as you want to breathe, because you're not going to get up, read technicals, interview people, practice your soft skills, set up informationals. You're not going to do that unless you really want to. There are so many students who reach out to me literally on TikTok. I literally had some guy, like, he reached out to me, literally, he's like, hey, Sajin, I found your videos on TikTok. I want to get into banking, X, Y, and Z. And I'm like, okay, well, what have you done, right? I'm like, hey, I can tell you what to do. Like, you don't need to hire me to coach you. I'm literally telling you what to do for free. In all of my videos, I tell you guys each and every single week what you need to do. It's not that hard, and we're gonna go through it. And he's like, oh yeah, I haven't done any of that, and I haven't thought about maneuvering and switching classes and staying an extra year. I haven't done any of this tactical stuff. I'm like, well, then you don't want to work in investment banking. And it's not my job here to kind of like coddle and hold your hands. Like, yes, as a coach, I am here to help, and there is a support system. But I have to hold you accountable. So if you reach out to me and say you want to do something, but you're not practicing your technicals, you're not sending out a cold email, you're not reaching out to upperclassmen getting their views. If you're not doing any of this, then you're not going to get into banking. And who is that ultimately going to fall on? It's going to fall on you, right? So I can tell you exactly what to do, lay out the path, show you the doors to open, but you actually have to go and do that. You have to open the door and walk through it, right? So again, that's a mindset that helped me. But I didn't need to put myself in that mindset because I was living that life, right? I was like, shit, like, I need a job. I got to help my family. Like, I need this, right? Like, I didn't have a choice. I wasn't going out Thursday nights to the bars. I wasn't going out to the football games on the weekends. I wasn't partying every week, right? I was in my room prepping and drafting cold emails to hundreds of bankers. You know, it is what it is, right? Like, that's what I had to do coming out of Middlesex County College and then Rutgers Newark, right? Like, let's get that clear, right? So, and this was before Rutgers Newark was like a part of the New Brunswick family. That shift occurred like literally 2 years after I left, where they finally started to acknowledge the fact that, hey, Rutgers Newark like does exist, and like we should have shared recruiting resources. That to me to this day really fucking bothers me. Like, really fucking pisses me off that for some reason Rutgers New Brunswick thought they were high and mighty, the nose in the air, and didn't allow Rutgers Newark kids to network and be involved on campus with New Brunswick opportunities. Like, what the fuck, Rutgers? Like, I'm pissed about that. I want to figure that out. But anyway, wow, 10 minutes in, guys. I'm sorry, 10 minutes in. All right, what to do RFN right now if you're a freshman and sophomore. Folks who are watching online, orient yourself to the left-hand side of the slide right here. I'm drawing a big old circle around it. Freshmen and sophomores, right? This is where we're going to start. So here are the 5 steps, right? These are the 5 steps. What is your initial preparation look like? What is your, and what that means is like timing, years to graduation. If you're at a complete non-target, do you transfer? If you're at a county college, what type of schools are you targeting? And what type of roles do you want to start thinking about? Step 2 is what do you need to do right now, and what are possible opportunities for you to explore that maybe you're not thinking about? Step 3 is, hey, start executing, start thinking outside the box. Step 4 is your ROI or reaching out initiative and interview preparation. And step 5 is, hey, what are the results been and what are some other options we can look into? So step 1 is usually between like August through December, August through January, ideally as a freshman, not as a sophomore, but even as a sophomore, it's fine. Now, the first thing that I talk about here is timing. Now, what do I mean by timing? If you're a freshman or a sophomore and you're at a non-target or even a semi-target or whatever, outside of being at like a top 10 school, this is something that you should genuinely think about is that, hey, does it make sense for me to transfer? Do I, do I think about that, right? But before we get to that, take a step back and ask yourself and look at your ecosystem. And what does this mean? Looking at your ecosystem and looking at your historical placements and looking at your on-campus recruiting, what that means is, hey, take a look at the sophomores, take a look at the juniors, take a look at the seniors, and where have they placed, where did they summer, where do they land full-time, and then take it a step further and be like, all right, let me go on a Google rabbit hole and a LinkedIn deep dive and be like, okay, where did, the graduating class, and I would suggest going back 3 years. So if you're about to graduate and let's say you're going to graduate in 2025 or 2026 or 2024, go back and be like, hey, where did the class of 2019, class of 2020, class of 21, class of 22, where did they place, right? Was it regional boutiques? Let's say you're at a regional school, right? Did anyone make it to New York City? Did anyone make it to LA? Did anyone make it to San Fran, right? Start looking at that and then start recognizing like, okay, hey, did these folks get there through because of like special programs like SEO or MLT? Did we have alumni there, or was it just sheer brute force networking, right? And you need to start organizing these data. And look, within reason, I might be a little OD, but I do think it's important to do this level of homework to understand, okay, my ecosystem at this school, let's say I go to Vanderbilt University, shout out to a student who emailed me from Vanderbilt. That's why I'm using this reference. But let's say you go to Vanderbilt University, right? This student's really into media and entertainment and technology. So it's like, all right, well, hey, let me take a step back. Let me look at historical placements. Let me look at the ecosystem. Let me look at where people have been placing, where they currently placed. And then the third point to that is like start looking at what on-campus recruiting opportunities exist, right? They may be sparse. They may be in abundance, right? Who knows? But see what's there. And what that means is, look, for me, when I was at Rutgers, dry pickings, right? But there were certain firms, there were certain local firms. So there were companies like Prudential, what's that other? There are companies like MetLife. And I know people watching might be like, hey, Sajin, those aren't bulge bracket, that's not Goldman TMT, but that's your short-sightedness and ignorance speaking. That's what that is, because there are a lot of buy-side roles within these large insurance companies that pay really well, and they do a lot of pure play private capital, private debt investing, whether that's mezz lending, secured term loan lending, which, look, I get it, it might not be sexy, but they also, some of these companies also have private capital arms, they have internal VC arms. So while people might laugh and be like, oh, that's not sexy, guess what? There are guys who are going in there working for life, making anywhere from 100 to 250K as you move up, and getting full 100% 401k match, bonuses, great benefits, and guess what, guys? Really important, job security, right? That's also important, and a decent work-life balance for working buy-side gigs. Anyway, with that being said, is that look through your OCR, right? Because there might be something that people might overlook, because a lot of front office students who are like focused on the front office, they just overlook any and all OCR, right? They'll only look like, oh, is there any IBD stuff? And if not, I'm not going to do it. So that's like your first mistake, is that you have to be open to seeing what's out there, right? And if there's nothing there, there's nothing there, but don't overlook that. And then other things that you should be doing, especially as a freshman, to start building up your body of work, which I'll get to, and especially as a sophomore, if you're kind of back in the game, like, time-wise, concurrently as you're evaluating, and guys, this is where it gets hard, right? It's hard to evaluate, hey, what have historical placements been? Where have people gone in the past? Where are people going now? What you need to do in addition to that as you're kind of doing your homework and figuring all this out, is like, hey, are there any opportunities for me to work for free? And this might be tough. I know this isn't for everyone because some people might have to do like work study and actually work to help pay bills and stuff. But if you're in a decent size metropolis city area, even something the size of like New Brunswick, New Jersey, Newark, New Jersey, if you're in some sort of city area, I guarantee you there will be some sort of advisory services firm, some sort of accounting firm, valuation advisory, some sort of brokerage, wealth management. I mean, it is inevitable. I don't care if you're in Kentucky, if you're in Lexington, Kentucky. No offense to anyone who's listening to me in Kentucky, but you don't need to be in New York City to find an unpaid internship in a front office role. You can be anywhere in the country, right? Because there are a plethora of front office type opportunities. Like I said, valuation advisory, wealth management, accounting, whatever. It's not true front office, but it's work experience in a service, in a service advisory type function, right? That a lot of students overlook. And if you're a freshman at a county college, if you're a sophomore at a county college in a non-target, these are the type of internships that you need to do to start building up your resume, or what I like to call your BOW, or body of work, right? So moving along to step number 2, this is kind of like October through January of your freshman year and your sophomore year. I don't know what that is. Oh, I think someone's pinging me on, never mind. Somewhere between October and January of your freshman and definitely your sophomore year, maybe even earlier, I'd say definitely October, and that's why I have October here. If you guys look at my slide, oh, what did I just do? Sorry. Going all over the place. Sorry. You really need to start thinking and be like, okay, this is a multi-step process. Do I transfer? What are target schools that I could look at that I will be a realistic candidate for? And if I transfer, does it make sense to stay an extra year? And even in the event that I do not transfer, do I stay an extra year? And this kind of ties in, this third point ties in with like my, the prior point I made, is start looking at unpaid front office opportunities in other cities, right? When I did my investment banking internship in Boston, yeah, they gave me a stipend, which was enough to cover rent. But what about clothes, food, shoes, transportation, taking Amtrak back to Jersey, living life, right? Lunch, right? I'm in Boston. You need money. You can't just live off of a stipend for $1,000 or whatever to live at rent. I mean, now they pay, but, for me, they're like, hey, we'll give you a few G's a month, just to cover rent, but everything else you're on your own, right? Including transportation and all that. So step 2, between October and January of your freshman and or sophomore year and how that overlaps. And the reason it's kind of fluid is because you need to decide, am I a realistic candidate to transfer to a better school? Am I staying an extra year, whether I transfer? And if you transfer, you 100% should stay an extra year. Or in my current school, do I stay an extra year? And at the same time, as you're looking for these work for free opportunities, there are a plethora of actual front office roles that will let you work for free during the school year. Oh God, excuse me. Jesus, this tea is still hot. I put in 2 ice cubes and this tea is still like piping hot right now. Good God, hold on. Yeah, I would have been pissed. I thought my XLR cable was off or out. Anyway, now these 4 bullet points that I have, and please, if I feel bad because there's so many students who I didn't get to reach, who may have graduated, who could have gotten into banking had they only heard to my podcast 4 years ago or listened to me. And folks who are listening, I'm looking at the camera right now. I'm putting both my hands together and I am beseeching you. I am begging you, to students who are listening to this, stop trying to be smartasses and taking hard classes your freshman and sophomore years. Everything you need to learn, you can learn from a guide that you can read on your own on the weekends or at night. Take easy classes. I don't understand why this is so hard. It behooves me. I am gasped by what is going on with people trying to take the hardest classes, and kids who know they want to work in banking deciding oh, I want to double major in comp sci and math. Listen, short of you being really smart, short of you wanting to become, going into algorithmic trading or being in a more technical role at a quant fund, and you're actually that smart to actually even think about that stuff, drop the math major, drop the comp sci major, drop the physics major. And I know people are listening and watching this. I'm like, Sajin, how many finance kids are double majoring in this stuff? Trust me, there are enough out there that it like gives me pause. And you know why? Because I was once that. I double majored in comp sci and finance. And it was like, as I was in my second year at Middlesex, I was like, wait the fuck up. Like, yo, why am I taking Java 2, C++, Python? Why am I doing this? Why am I taking Calc 4? I do not need to know differential equations at all, ever in my life. I will never need to use linear algebra, ever. Why am I taking calc-based physics? There is no point in doing that. So let me regroup and get focused. Freshmen and sophomores, it is not too late. I implore you, lighten your course load and focus on your GPA. Your GPA is literally all that matters. Perception is everything. I don't care. You can listen. GPA does not matter to an extent, right? It's a numbers game. Someone will always give you a chance. You never say never. Guess what? If you have anything below a 3.5, it is harder to sell your candidacy because there are people with 4.0s at Ivy League schools. There are people with 4.0s who are at Ivies, who are athletes, and who are double majoring. So if you think you're going to get in with like a 3.4 or a 3.3 at a non-target with a single major, listen, and listen, I was a first-generation immigrant student, so I understand. You have to work. Times are rough with your family. You're putting things on card, and there's like the stress of like that environment. I understand, so I can empathize with that. But what I need to stress is that, with that being said, lighten your course load and take easier classes. They're not going to ask you for your transcript your freshman and sophomore year. They're not going to, hey, what classes you literally, other than your core foundational classes. And sometimes you can't even take some of those as a freshman and sophomore, right? Financial accounting, managerial accounting, you can't even take that. It might be like introduction to finance, right? That's an easy class. Stop taking advanced level valuation finance classes. Anyway, that was a 4-minute rant on why you should not take hard classes, because what happens is a lot of students take hard classes, their GPAs take a hit, and then you're kind of climbing out of that hole. You have to stay an extra year. You don't get the looks you need. And it's just kind of this circular, motion of just like, you're fucked, right? So don't do that. Please do not do that. Think about your course load. Think about what hard classes you could push back. Focus on your GPA and take easy classes so you can spend time networking, interview prepping, and guess what? Securing an offer in investment banking. So now, one more thing hold on. I circled the wrong thing, which is hilarious. Oh, right here. There you go. The last thing is your financial situation, and I'm circling with unpaid front office internships. I don't want to sound ignorant, that I understand not everyone can take an unpaid internship. What I did is my sophomore year, when this should have been my junior year, but I stayed an extra year at Rutgers. When I transferred from Middlesex, again, guys, this is called gaming the system and thinking, right? I was like, look, I can't afford to take an unpaid internship, investment banking internship in another city. So how can I get money to do that, in lieu of taking a loan? So Rutgers is big on corporate finance. You go to Rutgers, you can get a corporate job anywhere, corporate finance, FP&A, whatever, at Pfizer, Merck, Mondelez, wherever, right? J&J has a fantastic co-op program for 6 months, and they pay you anywhere from $17 to $20 an hour to work 9 to 5, Monday through Friday, and it counts as like 30 credits or something, right? So I only had to take like 2 classes on Saturday, and I took like 1 night class. Now, it was crazy because I was working 9 to 5. It was a full-time job. I was taking a night class, and I was taking 2 Saturday classes. So my life kind of sucked, but guess what? I was also making thousands of dollars each month, because I was like, you know what? There's going to come a chance that this summer or next summer, I'm going to have to take an unpaid internship in a different city, and I'm going to have maybe like $6 to $9K to $10K saved up, so I can afford to pay for school, gas, clothes, transportation, and I could go work for an investment banking firm anywhere in America, because I'll have like $12K in the bank, right? And so this is the part where, to have that type of thinking, you need to realize, like, all right, if I'm a freshman at a non-target or a county college or a sophomore I know I'm not going to be competitive for these front office roles, right? You're not. Now, I'm not saying not to apply, not to network, not to email. You should always do that, but you should have your plan B, C, D, and E, right? Which for me, I was like, yo, let me get this co-op opportunity. Let me rack up. And as I was working at J&J, full disclosure, I probably was the worst co-op in history. I want to apologize to Jackie, Matt, Lynn, Jeff, because my entire time at J&J, I was like, yo, they're never going to fire a co-op. I legitimately was just like prepping for interviews, reading guides, sending cold emails, and I was actually networking with like all the corp dev guys at J&J, because J&J has an internal VC team. They have J&J Johnson Johnson Development Corporation. They have their own corp dev team, corp strategy team. So I was like networking with all those folks at J&J, because I just went on LinkedIn, and this is what you should do. Is I went on LinkedIn and I was like Johnson & Johnson Investment Banking, Johnson & Johnson Private Equity, Johnson & Johnson Harvard Private Equity, Johnson & Johnson Equity Research, so on and so forth, because I was trying to find folks who had worked in banking, etc., and other front office roles, and had moved over into J&J, because I was like, wait, let me reach out to them, because these folks probably still have friends in banking and can give me advice on, hey, how to have a career in banking and what have you and whatnot, right? So again, I had the wherewithal to do that. That's why I'm teaching you to do that, is like have that foresight to think ahead, right? Like, hey, what can I do today to prepare me tomorrow? So again, think about your financial situation. I understand not everyone can work for free, but what can you do to maybe prepare for free? Is there a way where you could take jobs on campus, get a co-op like I did, save money so you can work for free, right? Oh God, guys, I am truly sorry. I'm at 30 minutes right now. I'm really, really sorry. I said I'd keep these episodes at 20 minutes. I'm at 30 minutes right now. So look, I'm going to stop right now. I'm going to have to have a part two. So part two is going to be part two is going to be steps 3 to 5, which is like execute, think outside the box. Step 4, reaching out initiative and interview prep. And step 5 is going to be, hey, what are our results? How to evaluate what you're doing? And hey, what are my other options that exist? But as far as, episode 10 and kind of recapping county college investment banking, how I did it, steps 1 and 2, as a freshman and sophomore, you need to do that initial prep, that initial analysis. And what that means is, what does your timing look like? When do you graduate? How much time do you have to graduation? How old are you? And if you're thinking about, if you're at a county college and you're looking obviously to transfer to a 4-year university, what are your target schools? Are you a strong candidate for these target schools? What are your backup plans, right? And even if you're at a non-target, still do that, right? Hey, what are schools that I could transfer to realistically? What is my GPA? What are the requirements? And as you're doing this, concurrently reach out to students at these schools, right? And if you're already there, reach out to the students who are upperclassmen, reach out to folks who already graduated. And if you can't reach out to them because you're still kind of not ready to do that, you can just go on LinkedIn and see like, hey, how did people place historically? Where have people gone regionally, bigger cities, what groups, what types of firms, what companies, and really start getting all that data together. Because if you can do that your first few months as a freshman, you can start kind of mapping out your roadmap and you'll be in a really good position. Step 2 is kind of that multi-step process where you actually are kind of executing and kind of realizing like, okay, well, hey, I know I have to transfer to a four-year university. These are my biggest schools that I'm targeting. Or if you're at a non-target, hey, these are the schools I'm looking at. I'm going to stay an extra year. And you know what? Let me start looking at some paid internships I can start doing, because if you're going to stay an extra year, you can start beefing up your resume and start doing a corporate finance co-op or a corporate finance internship if you're a freshman and sophomore and you're going to go to college for another 3 years because you're transferring and you're going for 5 years instead of 4. And having a corporate finance internship or some sort of professional experience does look good on your resume. And maybe during the school year, you do that unpaid internship or that kind of mid-office role, wealth management, whatever. And then in the summer, you do that paid corporate finance gig, all while continuing to network with folks, right? And then again, this is also that same time where you're kind of concurrently being say, hey, let me manage my course load so I can get a better GPA. I can focus on my networking and interviewing. And at that same time, you're like, you need to start making that decision of like, okay, well, hey, am I staying? Am I going? Am I going for an extra year? Let me pull the trigger on an unpaid internship just to, get the body of work ready. Is there something I could do paid? So that's the recap, guys. I went on much longer than I thought. I'm truly, truly sorry. I will keep these a little bit tighter and keep them closer to 20 minutes. And with that being said, episode 10 is out. I will see you guys episode 11 next week. Take care. Peace.